Hello, today I'm going to be analyzing the elections in Japan. Let's begin. Hello, welcome to Global Nationalism. I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and in all countries around the globe. Today I'm going to be conducting some election analysis. The election I'll be analyzing today is the election to Japan's lower house, which happened on 8 February of this year, in which Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister was elected. And I want to discuss how the number of seats she won and her party and coalition, and also some of the policies she has said that she will implement if she gets reelected, which she has. And without further ado, let's get started. An early general election was held in Japan on 8 February 2026 in all constituencies to elect all 465 seats of the House of Representatives, the lower house of the National Diet. I apologize if I am pronouncing this word or any other Japanese word incorrectly. The election took place nearly 4 months into Sanai Takaichi's tenure as Prime Minister of Japan, which began on 21st October after she won the 2025 Liberal Democratic Party presidential election and formed a Liberal Democratic Party Japan Innovation Party coalition. A newly formed centrist Reform Alliance, a new political party, and had was formed, which was a merger between the primary opposition Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito, the LDP's former longtime coalition partner. LDP beat them and got a historic landslide victory with 316 seats. This gave the party a two-thirds supermajority in its own right. Meanwhile, the CRA severely underperformed, losing more than two-thirds of its pre-election seats and leading to the resignations of party co-leaders Yoshihiko Noda and Tetsuo Saito after the election. This is the background of the election, of what was happening in Japanese politics before it began, before this election. The previous election was in 2024, the Japanese general election, and also there was a 2025 Japanese House of Councillors election, which is the upper house of the Japanese parliament. Both of these resulted in the loss of majorities for the Liberal Democratic Party and Komeito governing coalition under Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Ishiba invoked a parliamentary plurality in both houses and stated that he believed the LDP had a responsibility to lead the government as it would in most other parliamentary democracies. Because although they didn't have a majority in either of the parties, in either of the houses, through parliament, they had a majority. So he said they could continue running government, and they did. Then on 7th September, Ishiba announced that he would resign as president of the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. This was his way of taking responsibility for the LDP party's loss of majority. On 10th October, Komeito Chief Representative announced it will lead a ruling coalition. And on 20th October, Takaichi, the Japan Innovation Party leader, Hirofumi Yoshimura, agreed to sign a coalition government. Takaichi was elected prime minister by the Diet on 21st October in a right-wing conservative coalition was formed. I am a right-winger, I'm a conservative, and most importantly a nationalist. And so I am partial to the LDP and other right-wing parties in Japan, but I uh, won't tell Japanese people who to support. I have my own opinions, but ultimately the decision is theirs. On 19 January, Takaichi officially announced their intention to dissolve the House of Representatives on 23rd January at a press conference. This was her campaign, riding on the high approval ratings of her cabinet. the snap election was seen as a power move to boost Sanai Takaichi's mandate and gain a majority in the lower house. She said that she would resign if the ruling bloc did not win a majority. Now, the LDP was campaigning on its promises of increased spending, tax cuts, a new security strategy by abolishing the five categories which restricted defense equipment exports to non combat purposes. The party also looked to tighten rules on foreign acquisition of housing and land. I support, I don't really know enough about economics to say that whether increased spending and tax cuts is optimal, but as a person who is in the working class in my country, I can sympathize with Japanese workers who want to get tax cuts too. I hope they do. And yes, I do think that Japan needs to adapt its and amend its security policy in its constitution. I think that's Article 9, if I'm not mistaken. And they need to start becoming a normal country with a normal defensive army. And they should be able to export defense equipment for more than for combat purposes, not just non-combat purposes. I don't think they should go fully against their pacifist nature, but at least not immediately, but eventually they should. I condemned Japan's behavior in World War II, its invasion of Southeast Asia and China, and the violence that occurred there. However, I don't think that means that Japan in the 21st century should be pacifist forever and not have the ability to defend itself like any other country. The party agree with this very much on tightening rules on foreign acquisition of housing and land. I think my country too has restrictions on foreign acquisition of property, which I agree with, though there is still some ability for foreigners to own property in India, which I hope the government is making sure is not taken advantage of by foreigners. And I hope Japan makes sure that housing within their country is available first and foremost to their own people, not to wealthy foreigners. Here's what the BBC says about Japan's election. Japan has given Takaichi a landslide win, but can she bring back the economy? The question is, can she deliver what has eluded the Japanese economy for decades? Faster growth. Japan has sluggish growth, public debt that is the largest in the world, and a working population that is both aging and shrinking. Takaichi had campaigned on the promise that she will spend more, including investment in key industries to boost growth. She vowed to cut taxes, and while the markets were rattled with doubt over how she would fund these plans, her overwhelming majority has assured investors with a positive market reaction to her Sunday night win. When she came into office in October, government bond yields, effectively the large interest Japan pays to borrow money, jumped. And the message that powered Takaichi's rise, voters feel poorer and prices feel higher. She was saying this with reference to the previous prime minister, which was even though he was from the same party, which is a risky political move to make, but an honest statement and showed, I think, to the Japanese people that she would govern differently than Ishiba, the previous prime minister. And Takaichi's proposed tax cuts may ease the pain for households in the short term, which will increase consumption, which will be good for Japan's economy. And uh, now, right, some people are saying, economists are saying that her policies could cause Japan's national currency, the yen, to become weaker, which could push up the cost of imports, especially energy and food, but can help exporters competing with cheaper Chinese goods. A weak yen also changes how Japanese people feel about living there. It makes property and overseas goods harder to afford, while making the country cheaper and more attractive for foreign visitors. So, uh, yeah, means it will be good for tourism. Now, tourism is good for any country, but it should not be seen as a major source of income, like the prime source of income. There's a common thing that economists talk about as the tourism trap, which causes countries to become over reliant on tourism. I hope Japan doesn't go into that trap. And then the one issue that everyone talks about when talking about Japan's population and its workforce has been shrinking for years. One of the oldest societies in the world, this has put pressure on public services such as healthcare and social care. There are labor shortages in construction, care work, agriculture, and hospitality. Fewer workers means less output and therefore weaker growth. The BBC says immigration could ease the strain. And the government has quietly relaxed some rules in recent years, and the number of foreign workers has risen. But there are still far fewer foreign workers in Japan compared to Europe or North America. I think this is a good thing. I think there's a lot of news from Europe and North America that the local populations are suffering because of the influx of foreign workers. It is causing them to compete with more people, and it's causing wage competition in their countries. So I don't think it'll be good for the Japanese people if large numbers of foreign workers came into their country. And I think maybe even a small number would not be good for the Japanese people, although it would be good for the companies who employ those workers, would be good for the people. So I don't think uh, the government should bring in foreign workers. And I'm glad that Takaichi has signaled she is unlikely to do much to change this because immigration is hugely sensitive, especially among her conservative base. She and her allies said Japan should instead lean on technology, automation, higher participation by women and older workers to lift productivity. I agree with leaning on technology and automation, but I don't think that the government should push for higher participation by women and older workers. I think it should let the markets decide who to hire, women, older workers, or men, and not manipulate markets to get companies to hire these groups. And about China, Japan needs to change and fast because China has already overtaken it in scale and industrial capacity, while Vietnam and other Asian economies are catching up. And Beijing is Tokyo's biggest trading partner. That is important for Takaichi's plan because a rebound of domestic demand will take time. Until then, Japan will have to rely on trade to boost growth. Prime Minister Takaichi has said she wanted to reduce Japan's dependence on China in critical sectors like rare minerals and pharmaceuticals and as a priority. She has thanked Trump for his warm words endorsing her. Takaichi rejects equidistance between the US and China, seeing the alliance with Washington as central to Japan's security and economic resilience. I support this position that she has. China is not an ally, the US is, and China has territorial claims on territory that Japan controls. And from my limited understanding, I think Japan has a strong claim to that, or not, and that I don't think it's those islands were somehow always China's and Japan just came and took them. I think it's pretty much set, should be with Japan. They're closer to Japan anyway, and so yeah. Until as long as that border dispute is existing, Japan cannot treat China as a ally and a normal country. It has to rely on the US to protect it through the alliance. What the China's and her Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's relationship has been so far. The China tried to pressure Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi after she made some unprecedented remarks that Japan could intervene militarily in Taiwan. However, voters, undeterred by apparent Chinese economic retaliation, gave her a stunning election victory. And This is all because of Takaichi's remarks in Parliament on November 7th that the self defense forces would be deployed under the right to collective self defense in worst case scenarios, such as the Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan. She says it's a survival threatening situation for Japan. I can sympathize with this and understand it, but do think it's an over exaggeration. Yes, if China were to invade Taiwan, a lot of the com- Japanese companies and in Taiwan would be affected. A lot of imports, technology imports that Japan gets from China, from Taiwan, like microchips and other products, might be stopped by China, especially because of the naval blockade. But does that mean that they should defend Taiwan? I don't know. I think in such a scenario that right now Japan should work with Taiwan and China to come to a peaceful settlement so that war and invasion are prevented from happening. And her comments cause outrage in Beijing, which claims Taiwan as its own. But I do think that, yes, if there is a attack by China, Japan has to defend Taiwan. It's because if China were to conquer Taiwan, then it could be closer to Japan and might take the Senkaku Islands too. Because of her statements, Beijing made some actions, warned tourists not to visit Japan, imposed a ban on seafood exports, and hinted at a return of restrictions on Japan bound exports of the rare earth minerals. So, what we can see from this is that the Japanese voters are very nationalistic. They, first of all, want the native population of Japan to remain in the majority. They don't want immigration at large amounts. They don't want to be replaced. And even if it would increase their population, they don't want it. And I agree because it will not increase the population of Japanese people. It would just increase the population within the country of Japan's territory. And the people would be replaced by immigrants and foreigners. And yeah, that wouldn't be good for the people there. And um, as far as China goes, I do think that Japan should take a strong stance against China, especially not just for Taiwan, but for its own border dispute with China. It should be very clear to China that Japan will react militarily if attacked. But I do hope that Japan's new prime minister works diplomatically with China, tries to uh, bring peace between Taiwan and China, and can peacefully resolve the border dispute, hopefully with China giving up its claims. And I think she should work with India and the other Quad countries, United States and Australia, uh, make the Quad stronger and help negotiate with China together as four countries rather than one by one. So yeah, I'm pretty much think that this is a good outcome for Japan and that she would hopefully be a I think she'll be a good prime minister and I wish her all the best and wish the Japanese people nothing but good fortune and I hope that their country can grow again economically and become successful and prosperous. And that's all I wanted to say. Please share your thoughts in the comment section. If you want to see other videos about election analysis, click here. If you want to see my previous video, click here. If you want to see the sources I use for this video, click the link in the description below. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.